All right. Embracing empathy in the workplace. Let's think about this for a second. Do you remember the last boss you had that was just, or that boss that was absolutely horrible? Or do you remember when you had a good employee or a good manager, just one day you didn't really understand or know why they left? We want to talk about embracing empathy in the workplace because that is the number one reason why people actually stay, right? If that's why people stay on the job, wouldn't we want to embrace or look at why people leave? So we know that the number one reason why people, according to your Harvard Business Review, number one reason why they leave, bad leadership, a bad manager, which means they leave because they hate their boss. They leave because they hate their boss. I was in a place earlier today where almost all of the senior leadership gone, fired or quit. Now, if almost all of the senior leadership is gone, what does that tell you? That tells you that there's a lack of leadership at the top. There's a lack of leadership at the top that understands and has embraced enough empathy and has embraced the concept of teaching and training and sharing and helping people grow. I guess it's just easier to either fire them or to run them off than it is to teach a day. So what about in your organization? So number one, bad leadership. Number two reason why they leave, they don't see opportunities for growth in the workplace. And again, whose fault is that if they don't see room for growth in the workplace? Their immediate supervisor, their leader. Why? Because it's their leader's responsibility to show them what those opportunities are, prepare them to be able to move into those. So if they can't see it and they don't understand it and they don't know how to get it, it's the leader's fault. The leader didn't teach them. The leader didn't train them. The leader didn't grow them. The leader didn't develop them. So if that's number one and number two, oh my goodness, what's number three? Number three is they're offered something better. But typically, people don't even look or consider something better if they like where they're at right now, if they can see the future potential, if they know that they're working in an environment where the business is they're creating something together. They're involved in something that's greater than just themselves, right? They're working on something together, striving for that common goal to get something specific done. They're making a difference. That's a good reason to stick around, right? But again, if you've got a boss you don't like, you don't see any room for growth or movement, and somebody offers you something better, in a heartbeat, we're out the door, right? We're moving fast. So what about understanding when people quit or when people start to look to leave? Well, they found in that same Harvard Business Review study, they found that they leave, number one, for a sense of performance compared. So they sit back and they're like, you know what? I'm just really not as good as my peers, and they'll look for something else. Now, what about not hitting life benchmarks? Man, I thought I'd be further than this by now. I really thought I'd be further ahead than this by now. And they start to think about that. And people who haven't reached their benchmarks that they set for themselves, they start looking 6% more often, right? Now, what about job anniversaries? Man, we hit that 5-year mark, that 10-year mark, that 15-year mark. We're at 20 years with the same company, and we're like, I probably should start looking for something else. 9% up, looking for something else. Now, what about job anniversaries? Okay, we talked about 9%. What about age milestones? 30, 40, 50, up 12%. People start looking for jobs 12% more, looking at switching and doing something else and moving on. And then after a class reunion, after you've gone to a class reunion, you've compared yourself to all of your peers, and you see a bunch of people that are further ahead than you. What do? You immediately start looking more for something else at a rate of 16% more. That's a lot, right? You had that 16, 12, 9, and 6. You had a lot of people looking for something else. Bad leadership and we're offered something better and we want to take it because we have bad leadership. Now, some of that is personal leadership, right? We may have some personal leadership issues where we're not leading ourselves well, but a lot of times it comes from the top down. Yes, we can make a difference, and yes, we have personal responsibility and take personal control for our own lives, which is why a lot of these folks are like, you know what? I'm going to take personal responsibility for my life. I'm out. I'm going to go somewhere else. And it's interesting because they talked about this and how companies are now monitoring your social media. They're monitoring your email. They're monitoring your cell phone. They're monitoring your time clock. And they run all this data, and it starts to spit out names of people that potentially could be looking for work somewhere else. And they'll actually have recruiters from your own company call you and say, hey, we have other positions within the same company that you might want to take a look at. Right? Crazy, but saves them hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? If they don't have to hire you and hire your replacement, train your replacement, and so forth. Sometimes we don't spend enough time thinking about the human resource, right? And how important it is to develop the human resource. Well, let's look at why people will stay. People stay because it's going to be the opposite of number one. They have a good boss. They don't hate their boss. They love their boss. Why? Well, to number two, because my boss takes time to listen to me. My boss cares as much about me as he does about the business. My boss is there teaching me, showing me opportunities, understanding, listening to me to where I am and where I want to go, and fills the gap for me so that I can move ahead, so that I can learn in order to go to where I want to go. And then when I'm offered something different, I'm like, no, man, are you kidding me? I have the best boss in the world. Why would I want to leave the best boss on the planet and go somewhere else? This doesn't make any sense. I don't care how much more money you're paying me. If I'm making okay money and I've got a fantastic leader and I see upside potential, why would I go? Right? So what does it come down to? It really comes down to empathy, leadership, and taking the time to listen and share with our employees, right? So I was reading Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. And he starts telling a story about this book right here. And I thought that was kind of crazy. But this book is Everybody Matters, Bob Chapman. And they're just talking about the fact that the Bob Chapman, he goes around and he acquires all of these companies that are on the downswing. They're on their way out. And the reason they're on their way out is because the leadership at the top, from the top all the way to the bottom, is toxic. So he goes in and he transforms the culture, these businesses, and turns them into thriving businesses, taking them from very mediocre income to sales going through the roof. And he does it by coming in and instilling trust and empathy and leadership that cares. His whole concept is right there. Everybody matters. The extraordinary power of caring for your people, like to stick around. You don't want them looking for something else. Let's treat them better. And I think